My name is Mona, and I'm a very grateful addict. I want to thank the committee for asking me. I guess I really have to thank Barbara J., who I sponsored, who they wanted, and she couldn't come, so she referred them to me. It seems it's very humbling to... I've spoken about 3 places where I was second choice to Barbara J. And she's a dynamite lady, and I hope you get her here because she has one of the finest programs of anyone I know. I want to tell you also that I was very impressed tonight that you didn't need to count. You know, it seems to be my lot in life to tell you that the reading they do at the beginning of every meeting is what saved my life. And in California, they teach us in first grade how to count. And I know I've been here. My birth date is the 12th of August, 1968. So I don't need comments, because I think if I don't get to hear what I need to hear when it's read, then I'm going to have to raise my hand again as a newcomer. And I've been there and done that, and I don't want to do that again. I'll try to tell you a little bit about what it used to be like, what happened, and what it's like today. I also need to tell you that I do not speak for Narcotics Anonymous, for which they are eternally grateful. As are some of the people I sponsored who were at world level service. So I'm real impressed with my time. I always say when I give my clean date that it may not impress you, but it impresses the shit out of me. Because I was a professional slipper. I was introduced when I was 20, stayed 3 days, and said if I was as old as these old broads, I'd stay here too, and by the grace of a loving God, I lived to be that old. It's a beautiful country here. You people are very fortunate. You know, I come from an area where there are a great many people, and a great many people in meetings, but I lived in Alaska for 10 years, and 6 people were a lot of people in a meeting. And, you know, now when I've gone back and there are 100 people at the meeting, I know the program is alive and well. So there's just the amount of people that they're supposed to be here. I'm born and raised in California in a place called El Centro, for any of you who are unfortunate enough to know where that is. It's on the Mojave Desert. It's where God put everything that creeps, crawls, and is dirty so he wouldn't clutter up the rest of the world with it. I'm half Irish, half Apache Indian, and I was raised a Roman Catholic, so you knew I had a great need for some kind of program. I am hopefully recovering from all 3 things. I am compulsive in every area of my life. I am 8 times married and 1 near miss. I've only found it necessary to do that once in recovery, and I watched him die of my disease. The last time I got married, I said I will never marry again, so I don't say that anymore, because as soon as I say never, God makes sure I'm doing it immediately. Today I say, hopefully I will never marry again. And so do all the men I know hope I will never marry again. I have set marriage back 2 generations. I have a lot of things that I believe. I'm very verbal in expressing what I believe. People who know me know that don't ask me my opinion unless you want it. You know, I pride myself on being a book person and a step person. And what I have to tell you is my story. It is not how you should do it. I am not in the business of lecturing. But I have pet peeves, and I have things that really bother me about what I see happening in recovery today. I am very fortunate that my vocation is I own and operate my own treatment facility. But I believe that we in these rooms let people in treatment facilities do what we do best, and that is the therapeutic value of one addict helping another. You know, I sit places and hear 12-step calls come in and people are too busy to go. Shame on you. I can't sponsor this person. Don't call me at 3 o'clock in the morning. Funny how selective we get when we have a little bit of clean time. You know, I believe, for me, that if you are still working the steps, that you are not clean. But if you've incorporated them into who and what you are, then you can truly say you are clean, because this is an inside job. When I'm working at something, I still have not made it part of who and what I am. And I believe that when I start incorporating those steps and the traditions, because the steps allow me to learn to make peace with me, and the traditions allow me to be able to stand you. So I think it's very funny when people count. Everybody knows the commas, the pauses, and over on the page when they do the steps, you get to the tradition. 3 people in the room know what number comes after which. Shows how spiritual we get. As I said, I was born and raised in El Centro, California on a cattle ranch by loving grandparents. My pet peeve that I hear said in meetings is TC lingo is I am from a dysfunctional family. Big fucking deal. You know, I was the most dysfunctional thing my family had seen in 10 generations. You know, and they loved me, and I believe there were thousands of people in my life who tried to love me, but I would not allow it. You know, I guess I can best tell you where my addiction took me. I graduated from high school when I was a month short at 16. I graduated from college when I was 18 and a half. I had my first doctorate degree when I was 21, and when I was 22, I was doing 10 to life. And that's where my addiction took me. That was the high point of my addiction. I would like to tell you that when I got out of the penitentiary that I said, I have found God and I'm going to change my life. I was there 7 years, and high on my list was I was going to get laid when I got out. And it took me 3 months to get around to it, because the dope was better than any piece of ass I ever had. I have never had the love affair with a man that I had with shooting dope. God has not made that man yet. I never had the love affair with my children that I had with shooting dope. I never had the love affair with my family that I had with shooting dope. And I forsook all those things to shoot dope. I did all the things and went all the places that I said I would never go and I would never do. And when I did, I just lowered the people I hung out with, because I'm a snob and I wanted to look down my nose at somebody. And at the end, I needed a ladder to look up to the curb. You know, but I wasn't raised to do the things I did. I'm a first-generation addict. Now, in my children's generation, it all went to shit. But in my generation, you know, I come from a family that order a drink and let the ice melt. Doesn't make any sense to me, you know. Or I've had too much, I think I'll quit. Psh, I'm getting a little drunk. That's the point of it. You know, not my family, you know. And I was spoiled. I'm the only girl and 35 grandchildren and the baby. And I was told all my life I was special, and what I heard was I was different. I had very, very, very selective hearing. I was raised in a religion that none of my cousins heard what I heard. You know, I heard if I was going to hell for thinking about it, I might just well try it on and see if it was worth the trip. And they didn't hear that. They heard that God loved them and they were special. And I believe that I came out of the chute feeling different. I believe that the reason I searched out drugs was because I spent my whole lifetime, from as long as I can remember, being on the outside looking in and wondering how come I felt different than you. You know, and I always say I'm a very grateful addict, because without the disease of addiction, I would stand before you on the outside looking in. And because God gifted me with the disease of addiction, I learned how to feel part of and not different from. How many of you in this room know what this ribbon is for? God bless you. I learned things that someone asked me, and it's quite unusual for people not to know what it's for, and that's why I was wondered how many of you know. We'll get to that later. How late do I talk till? Tuesday, huh? Well, kick off your shoes and relax. I learned a lot of things early in life. My grandpa raised me, and he was a little short Irish guy, and whose word was law. And I learned that it might be law with my cousins, but it wasn't law with me. And I could just climb up in his lap, and I could tell him things, and if I said I want that, he gave me 5. You know, and I always wanted to be a boy, because, I mean, I was different. And my grandpa used to say, well, if you can kiss your elbow, you can turn into a boy. And about first 15 years of my life, I tried kissing my elbow till I found that there's a definite advantage of being female. Especially if you've chosen the lifestyle that I chose for 23 and a half years. I know God loved me better because I got the price built in. And I never fit. I always felt different. I remember my cousins asking me, you give up, and I wouldn't have given up if they'd have beat me to death. And I don't know where that came from. You know, I remember I was teased because I didn't have a father. I mean, my mother and father were divorced, and I remember that I used to beat up on kids, and you know what? I'm a devout coward. As I got older, if you fucked with me, I didn't beat up on you, but I sure to hell knew people I could pay that would. You know, but I never could tell anybody that I don't know how that feels to be part of. And it wasn't because my family didn't offer me that. It was just, I believe I was born an addict. I believe that I had addictive behavior long before I found drugs. You know, and for a long time, drugs did for me what nothing else could. And I believe that they allowed me to survive a world that I found quite unacceptable. You know, there's no way to get from where I came from to here. There's no way for someone to ask me to come this far to speak from where I came from, but not from where I started out. Where I started out, I was the fair-haired child. I was the overly bright overachiever. But the only reason I overachieved is because it was my way of getting attention. The only reason I did well in school is because my mother graduated when she was 19 from college, and I hated my mother because it was her fault. So I graduated when I was younger. It wasn't that I was Albert Einstein. It was just that that was my way to be part of and not feel so separated from. And my grandfather had always told me that he would never leave me. And when my grandpa died, I knew it was my fault, that I wasn't good enough. The young lady that spoke last night talked about that, never being good enough. And I believe that he had died because if I'd have been better, he wouldn't have died. And they had a big Irish wake, and the alcohol flows, you know, and I had my first drink, and I said, yeah, buddy. You know, all that went away because I didn't care anymore what you thought about me. And I didn't care how I felt. And I took on the attitude at 9 years old, fuck you and the horse you rode in on. You know, and I maintained that attitude. I am 57 years old, and it's a little better today. Not much. I am a street fighter. I will die a street fighter. But through the grace of a loving God, I have made peace with the one person in my life that I never wanted to know, and that is me. I believe that I cannot love you until I have made peace with me. I am a great hostage taker. I'm a great controller and all manipulator. But until I learned to love me, I had nothing to give to anyone else. And I was highly indignant when I was told that when I was new. Like I said, I was 20 the first time I came, and then I went to penitentiary when I got out. I did another geographic, because, you know, if I went to a new place and had a new old man and had a new car and had a new dress and nobody knew, it would be different. And the one thing nobody had explained to me is that when I went, I took me with me. And so I was in Hawaii and about to go back to penitentiary one more time. See, my using kind of worked like this. I woke up, I got what I needed, and I went to jail. It was not real elaborate. It was not glamorous. It was not movie stars and people. It's just, I woke up, I picked up, and I went off. That was just how it was. I was not a silk sheet anything. I was an accident waiting for a place to happen. Most of my using. And God knows with alcohol was worse than anything, because with alcohol it put my mouth in gear. And I got my body rearranged on many occasions by stating what I had to state behind alcohol. When I was about to go back to penitentiary, my attorney and my mother and whatever man I was married to at that time, I'm getting old, so I don't remember. And they're probably eternally grateful I don't remember, because everybody I was there made too. So when we got divorced, said, thank God. They didn't mourn the passing of my relationship with them. And my mother said, well, all the right people are doing it's very chic. And, you know, we may be dumb, but I don't believe any of us are stupid. And I would do anything rather than being locked up. So I went to the other fellowship, and I have to tell you that I have nothing but admiration, because these people loved me. I don't believe it's necessary today, but they loved me. And, of course, we didn't know about cross-addiction in those days, so I quit shooting dope, kept drinking booze, and worked the 13-step to the very best of my ability. And if you're so new you don't know what the 13-step is, trust me, someone will explain it to you. I would like to tell you that only men 13-step, but this is an honest program. And I knew that eventually I would go back to California, and eventually my mother would meet me at the plane, and she would say something like, hello, nice to see you, or I love you, and when she did, I could go one more time. I also believe that there is not a dope fiend alive that has ever met recovery that if they could have done better, wouldn't have done better. I knew from the get-go that there was something that could be done about the way I lived, but I chose not to do it. You know, I believe I'm clean because of the grace of a loving God. I chose to quit shooting dope 15 years before I could put it down every day. I said, I'm not going to do it again, as I was on the way to doing it. And that doesn't mean that the people that die, God doesn't love. I believe the people that die using, God says, you have suffered enough, and you may come home and be with me and be at peace. But I believe that I have never had a day that I have chosen not to use, because left to my own device, I could give you a dynamic speech, and I could walk right out the door, and somebody would say hello, and that's reason enough for me to go. So that problem I gave to my God, and He takes care of that for me, and I don't have to worry about that today. I believe for me that the rest of the stuff is what I do to believe I deserve the gift. Because if you give me something and I don't believe I deserve it, I'll throw it away. And so all this other shit that I have to do to stay here is so that I believe that I deserve the gift that God gives me on a daily basis. I came home from Hawaii, and my mother said, "Hello, I've missed you." I also came home with 28 show cats. Now, my mother lives in a house that looked like nobody lives there. The carpet's white, the walls are white, the furniture's white. And my stepfather at the time said I was the only girl in Los Angeles with $30,000 worth of pussy in her house. And my mother said, "Well, now that you're clean and your life is together, we run these places," and they had very, very large liquor stores and markets and clothes and everything all under one roof. So I started a treatment program there. I have been in the treatment business longer than I have been clean. And one day, I used to go to those old places and do those old things. I'd sit in bars and order Coke. I do not drink pop today. I've never drank pop. I was raised in the desert. It's too fucking hot to drink pop. But I would sit in a bar and I'd say, "I'll have a Coke," and I would, live that vicarious watching everybody make an ass of themselves. I don't know what I was doing. And the day came when the bartender said, "Well, will you have a Coke?" And I said, "No, I'll have a Stinger on and over." And I was one more time back out there. And I was back out for 2.5 years. And I would like to tell you that I came back because I wanted to be a friend to my children, that I wanted to be a good mother, I wanted to be a good daughter. I don't even remember if I was married. No, I wasn't married when I came back. Whatever man I had cluttering up my life at the time that I wanted him to approve of me. But I came back because it just flat stopped working for me. If I could have shot dope one more day, I'd have a different clean date. I have a friend in California, his name's Eric, who has muscular dystrophy as a direct result of shooting dope. And I think Eric puts it best: any more and I would have died, and any less and I would have died. It's been a long time since I'd gotten high. It was all about just surviving out there. And so I didn't come back to these rooms for any wonderful reason. I didn't come back because I wanted to be a friend to mankind. I love newcomers. Says I walked in the room in Narcotics Anonymous and I knew I was home. I don't know what your home looked like, but mine didn't look like this. And I love when they've been here 30 heartbeats and they've found God and they have their life in order and everything is wonderful, and they wonder why all of us with time are having a little problem. And I always say, "This too shall pass, my love." I would like to have the unswerving, judgmental belief that I had in the first 30 days, but it somehow just slips away, living life on life's terms. When I came back to people, 5 people 12-stepped me. And the least amount of time any of them had's 5 years. And 3 of them died using. The statistics for us to survive are not high. And 3 out of 100 of us will be here for the long run. And you ain't getting my seat. So it cuts the odds down real much. And they told me a lot of stuff that I didn't want to hear. And I don't know why I paid attention. I am an arrogant bitch. I am strong-willed. I'm opinionated. I'm all those things. And I came back here and I went to a meeting of Narcotics Anonymous in Los Angeles. And I was told I was not welcome, that it was a man's disease. I said, "And you some bitches big enough to throw me out, I'll leave," and I have not found it necessary to use from that day to this. So the lie is dead women do recover. I will tell you, of the top 10 people, clean time in the world, 6 are women. put that in your pipe and smoke it. I love to go to L.A. because I'd have people, my revolving door had a motor on it. I was in and out so often, and they'd say, don't bother with her, she'll never make it. And I just like to go and go. But I believe I was right on time. I don't believe I got here a day too early or a day too late. If it had been my time earlier, God would have kept me here earlier. I had to do what I had to do to be able to stay. The getting here is easy. The staying is what's tough. I do not believe I earned my seat in Narcotics Anonymous. Because when I was out there, I took what I wanted, when I wanted, from whom I wanted, and I never looked back. But I have earned it since I have been here. I talked to bitches that I wouldn't spit on if they were on fire when I was shooting dope. I wouldn't have shot dope with 9/10 of you. And yet I tell you my innermost secrets today. I have women I sponsor call me up and tell me the most ridiculous bullshit. And I say, yeah, darling, okay. And when I was out there shooting dope, I'd say, what are you doing calling me on the phone? Don't you know who I am? Bad news is, yes, they do. I came back in, I crawled. Now I had money in the bank. I drove a new Mercedes. I had a maid. I had a swimming pool. And I looked a hell of a lot better than I look today. I was a lot younger when I got here. I have people tell me all the time, you've been clean longer than I've been old. Please don't tell me that, because it makes me just want to slap the shit out of you. Because if you don't pick up, you too will live to be old. But I will tell you something. When I was young, I could walk in a room and I could stop a clock. But the inside was real bad. Not many of you are probably old enough in this room to remember the movie called The Portrait of Dorian Gray. But this was a movie about a man who sold his soul to the devil so that he could look like he looked for his whole life. But up in his attic was a portrait of what he really looked like. And it was quite disgusting. It was rotten, and it was horrible, and it was ugly. And when I walked in a room when I was young and I could stop a clock, the inside was rotten. And today, gravity has set in, and a clock doesn't even halt when I walk in a room. But the inside's real, real nice. I am the woman that when I was a very small girl, I wanted to be. And all those things I was when I was using was my disease. It was not me. And it took me a long time to realize that I was not hip, slick, and cool. That I was afraid, and that I was loving, and that I was caring, and that I was kind. Because I don't know about where you came from, but where I came from, if I said, "Aw, I'm really afraid," they eat you for din-din, And I didn't learn those words, and I didn't learn them till a long time in recovery. And when I came back in, I got clean in North Hollywood. And I sponsored a lot of women over the years. They go through me like Grant through Richmond. They see that you got a little time. They say, "Oh, please sponsor me. I'll do anything." And then I tell them what I require to people I sponsor. It's the last fucking time I hear from them. And I can't find somebody that used like me. I can't find somebody whose lifestyle's like me. I can't find somebody who'll tell me what I want to hear. I am 57 years old, which means I have been around these programs for 37 years, and I have never heard that that is what's required of a sponsor. I believe what is required of a sponsor: 1, they have a sponsor. 2, women sponsor women. Don't come up to me and tell me there are no clean women in Idaho. That's a fucking lie. You know, they may not talk to you the way you want them to talk to you. They may not live next door to you. And they may have less time than you, but God has a hell of a sense of humor. That God has not made the man that I can't fool. And God has not made the man that can't fool me. And I need to have women in my life. You see, I avoided women like the plague because I knew that they knew. And I knew that they knew that I knew. And I knew that they were cutting down my odds, so I just cut them out of my life. And today, I have more women friends than I ever envisioned. And I didn't say acquaintances. I have more women friends today than I ever envisioned possible, and that is due to this broad that sponsored me. Because I hated this bitch. I hated everything about her. I mean... And, you know, we didn't choose and talk to and watch. I think they drew straws and this poor woman lost and she got me. And if you think I'm arrogant now, trust me, when I got here, I was not a day at the beach. And she said things to me that I would have killed anybody for saying to me. And she had me doing shit that you couldn't have got me to do with a gun at my head. So I know I'm clean because of the grace of a loving God, because I paid attention to this broad. And I hated her. I hated everything about her. Her house was immaculate. Her kid was immaculate. She had slept with one man in her whole life. What a concept. I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me, but what do I know? I used to tell her so many men in such a little bit of time, you know. And she loved me. She did not live to see me have the time I have today, and she didn't live to see me get as well as I am today, and God knows I am still a sick pup. But she loved me exactly the way I was when I walked in the room and when I get a new baby. You know, God is loving, and God is kind, and God is gentle. And we remember intellectually what it was like when we were using. But when I see a woman walk in the room that's trying to get through the first day, I remember what it was like to shoot dope. And the other time, I just intellectually remember, oh yeah, it wasn't too cool. But when I see a new woman, I get that sick feeling in the pit of my stomach that I spent 23 years living with on a daily basis. You know, and I tried everything I could to run this broad off from me. I tried everything. She used to pat me a lot. Now, I don't know about you women in this room. Maybe Idaho's different in California. But when I was new, if you put your hands on me, it meant money was going to change hands. You know, and that was man, woman, or horse. You know, you put your hand on me, grace my palm. And she touched me a lot, and I used to tell her, you put your hand on me, I'm going to shove up your ass. And she'd say, that's all right, honey, I love you. And she'd pat me. I don't know why I put up with it. I mean, nobody had touched me for years. When my grandpa died when I was 9, I vowed to God, as I did not understand him at that time, that I would never love anything enough to allow it to hurt me that way. And I kept that vow for 40 years before I ever loved anything, including 8 husbands and 3 children. Before I ever loved anything enough to give it the power to hurt me. I love the way newcomers hug. You know, when you're out there, you put your genitals against anything that'll stop for a heartbeat. When you get here, you only let shoulders touch, like, oh! And you can tell a newcomer because just shoulders touching, their ass is about 3 feet behind their back. And the part that does touch is like grabbing a hold of a cement post. They say, oh, yes, so nice to meet you. Can I give you a hug? And she used to hug me all the time, and I think, what does this bitch have in her mind? She's putting her hands on me. And the only thing she had in her mind is I was a very, very sick lady, And she knew where I had come from, and she knew I needed somebody to love me, because I wouldn't allow anyone else to. I used to think of things to tell her, just so she'd leave me the fuck alone. She'd say, "How do you feel?" And I'd give her how I thought, and then she'd say, "No, how do you feel?" And I finally one day said, "You know what? If I knew how the hell I felt, why would I have to talk to you?" She said, "Oh, you're getting better." You see, because when we're out there and people say, "How do you feel?" the answer I'd give, because I was a chameleon, I'd tell you what I thought you wanted to hear, because I had no working idea of how I felt about anything except bad. You know, and I hated her for a long, long time, so it's not important. I tell my babies, I don't know what you call them in Idaho, I call them babies. I don't call them sponsees, and God knows I don't call them pigeons. Somebody called me a pigeon when I was new, I'd have blacked their eye. But I call them babies, and I was called a baby for obvious reason. Babies know how to do nothing and know nothing about nothing, and they're loved until they can learn to take care of themselves, and I believe that's the way this program works. She told me I would go home and I would read literature from another fellowship. For those of you who are fortunate enough to got here since we had literature, God bless you. I got here when we didn't have literature. And she said I would go home and I'd read this book and I would come back with the first principle for the first step. Now this lady had been a Ziegfeld lady, dancer. She hadn't even finished school. And I thought, well, this poor intellectual thing, of course I'll have the word. I'll just dazzle her with my footwork. And because of my addiction, I had lost the ability to read and write. So I thought, well, I got this over. I don't have to read this shit. It's for you poor people who need to change your life. And I said, "Oh, I'm really sorry. I'd be very glad to do what you ask of me, but I can't read or write." She said, "That's all right, darling. We got it on tape." And I went home, and I came, and I would call this bitch with words and words and words, and it took me quite some time to come up. And I would like to share with you what I believe these words are, and again, they are my opinion. But I believe the spiritual principle for the first step is surrender, which is the theme of your convention here. You see, I had willingness for a long time, but I had never surrendered that of myself I could do nothing, and that I had lost the war. I just knew if I did it different and did it with somebody different and had a new old man and all that other jazz, I'd be able to shoot dope like other people. Now, I never wanted a little bit of anything, so I don't know what my brain told me. I'll do it this time, it'll be different, I'll just have a little. I never wanted a little money, a little pain, a little sex, God knows not a little drugs. And you know what? Today, I don't want a little money, a little pain, or a little sex. The drugs, yes, I'll pass that. Thank you very much. I have to be somewhere in July. But she taught me that surrender means it is a power move. It is not the move of a weak person. If you believe you're in the rooms of Narcotics Anonymous because you're weak, I would strongly suggest that weak dope fiends die using. Strong ones come here and do what is necessary to where they learn to love themselves enough to where they will not throw their life away using. You know, and so for me, surrender is a power move, because if I find out that I am powerless over people, places, and things, then I got to plug into the ultimate power of the universe. And that power will allow me to stay here when everything in me says, go. Because I live with this thing on the top of my neck called a brain that is awake 2 hours before I am every day of my life telling me, you cannot do this, and just a little wouldn't hurt. And some days I wake up and I said, yes, you rang, and I listen. But because God loves me and because God takes care of that problem, I don't have to worry about that today. But there are days I get up and I don't want to be in recovery. I want to rape, pillage, and burn. You know, I want to walk that razor's edge. Sometimes recovery is flat fucking dull. I mean, I know how I'm going to feel all day, every day when I get up. You know, I'm not going to get up, get well, and feel better and then feel worse. I get up and I know, well, this is where it's going to be all day. And sometimes that's boring. And the men don't have that, whatever that is that they have when they're shooting dope. You know, they probably have love and care and understanding when they're out there shooting dope. They don't got any of that shit. But, you know, some days I just don't like boring. But then I forget where it came from. When I got here, I sold my soul in hell. And I had sold my soul in hell for 23 years. A year ago, last January, I got to be clean as long as I used. What a miracle. I'd like to share with you what this square old broad taught me. This lady that I hated. The first thing she told me was it takes courage for a dope fiend to be clean. That recovery is no place for sissies. And I have a needlepoint pillow that says recovery is no place for sissies. Because there are days it's going to take 110% just to stand still and hurt. I get one break in life, and that's I get to be clean. Other than that, I have to live life on life's terms. And life is not fair, and life is not easy. But God gives me the strength because I have surrendered to walk through it with dignity. And that is a word I had no working relationship from the time I picked up until the time I quit, God willing, for the last time. I had no dignity in my life. And today I can walk through things that I don't like and things that are painful, and I'm a class act. God has given me that ability to look anybody in the eye and say I'm a very grateful, recovering addict, and I have plugged in to the power of the universe, and there ain't nothing out there I can't do. God will give me that. Ask, and it shall be given unto you. Seek, and ye shall find. Knock, and it will be open for you. Now, I heard that all my life growing up in church, and I thought that meant for you and not for me. And today I know that all I have to do is ask the God of my understanding, you know, what I want. And I believe God has 3 answers to every prayer. Yes, no, and if you insist. And I've been involved in some of those if you insist, and then I got to hit my knees and say, God, I lied. Please take this away. And the second thing she taught me was that honesty means I must be honest with me. It has nothing to do with your old man, your money, or your car. It has to do that I may do anything I want in recovery if I'm willing to be honest with me about what my motives are and be responsible for what happens. And I've done a lot of things in recovery that I'm not real proud of. But I had to be responsible. And if I learn to be honest with me, the side benefit is I can be honest with you. I am not a secret today. I am willing to share anything about myself on a one-to-one level. I am not willing to take a 5th step from the podium because I believe it's very inappropriate. There are things I did in my life that it's ego that would make me talk about them from a podium. That's what I have a sponsor for. You know. And the third and most important thing that she taught me was the definition of love. And it's a word we throw around all the time in Narcotics Anonymous. And I believe it's a word that very few of us have any working relationship with. And her definition of love, and the one I believe is true for me, is love is something given freely, expecting nothing in return. I can walk into a room of Narcotics Anonymous and say, I love you all. God knows there's some of you some bitches I don't like. But my program doesn't say I have to like you. It just says I have to love you. Because if I don't love you, there's no love for me. And when I love people, I had a whole fucking list you better measure up to. If you love me, you'd get me this. No, 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 no. See, I love people in my life that have died using. Doesn't mean that I didn't love them. Just meant they didn't love themselves. So it's not a prerequisite for me to love you that you behave in a manner that I think's appropriate. Because if it does, there'd be 3 people in the world I love, and that'd be it. You know, and 2 of them would be dogs. She took me on through the steps, and I hear a lot of talk about the second step has to do with being restored to sanity. It's my personal opinion that the second step has to do with faith. That I have the faith to believe that God will do for me what I'm too fucking lazy to do for myself. I hear all the time from podiums, I am working this program to the best of my ability. I have never met a dope fiend that works recovery to the best of their ability. I have met a great many that work them on a daily basis to the best of their willingness. Because if I worked to the best of my ability, I'd be a water walker by now. And I ain't. You get to think you're that about 7, and then you fall your ass in the water a few times and find out you're not a water walker. And, well, when I was 7, I was so spiritual, I felt sorry for the rest of you poor people. And then I will tell you, when I was 14 years clean, it was the worst year of my life, using or clean. Because God saw fit to take everything that made me who I was. And she told me that the third step, turning my life and my will over to the care of God, is I understand Him. And I hear a lot of people say, I don't understand God. You better fucking learn to understand Him, because you're going to do business with Him for the rest of your life. And if you're going to do that, the spiritual principle for that step is trust. And you see, I have to know you to trust you. And I have to understand my God. He's not your God. He's my God. And my God can be anything I want Him to be. Hopefully He is loving, He is caring, He is kind, and He is forgiving. Because I believe that God forgives me in the direct proportion that I forgive you. And if I don't forgive you, then I think I'm on real thin ice. You know, God forgives me. I'm here. Why am I so arrogant to carry my past life around like a gold star? I was forgiven the day I walked here. I do not believe that I have to pay for what I did before I got clean. But I've been here long enough to know that I pay dearly for what I do since I've been here. Because what goes around comes around. And I was not a bad person trying to get good. I was a sick person trying to get well, and that's the same thing I am today. And many times I let my mouth overload my ass. Many times I gossip. Many times I take your inventory unfairly. And I believe that I pay for that. And she took me on through the steps. In those days, we did the steps in 30 days. I hear people stand from this podium, take a 5-year cake, and say, I've never worked a step. Better you than me. I mean, that's hard time. It's nothing worse than not having the dope to turn your mind off and have no program to bring you any peace. That's real, real tough. I had a lady talk to me today about having a tough time finding a sponsor. It's a tough road to walk alone. I think it's spiritual arrogance if you do. Sponsor will guide you. Sponsor will love you. A sponsor will tell you, I would suggest you don't do that. You'll do it anyway. Universal suggestion is, we strongly suggest you do not get emotionally involved with the opposite sex or same sex, depending on your sexual preference, for the first year, and as soon as it's out of everybody's mouth, we all run and do it. My sponsor said, Mona, with your record, you really don't need to get involved. And man, she didn't have it out of her mouth till I found him. And of course, I was exceptional because he had 8 years. And I had a few months. So I knew I was ahead of the rest of you poor slobs. Here, why else would he talk to me? He had one little minor flaw. He already had a wife. But that was his problem. I was certainly pure. I wasn't married to anybody. And I made the fatal mistake of saying in front of a room full of about 350 people, God has not made a piece of ass I'm going to get loaded over, and that relationship sorely tested that statement. And a child was born of that relationship, dead, and that's the day he decided it was probably time he went back to his wife. And my sponsor had told me for a long time, Mona, you deserve something better than somebody's leftovers. But I didn't hear that until I buried my son alone. And I knew that I deserved something that God would bring me that was mine. And so I stopped dating other people's husbands. I was also told that I would go to 365 meetings in 365 days, and if I missed a day, I'd start over. And I went to over 700 meetings in the first year I was here. I was told that I wouldn't be allowed to go anywhere but this one clubhouse, and I had to be there a half hour before and stay a half hour late. And I had to make coffee. I don't even drink coffee. I had to make coffee, and then I had to wash. In those days, we had real cups. Now we don't have real cups because they'd unload them in the first night. They'd just walk out of the room. I got to wash cups, and I said, but you don't understand. I have a maid. I don't wash cups. She says, you do now. And I was not allowed to speak for the first year because she told me she didn't need me spreading my disease, that everybody had enough trouble without listening to my point of view. And the first time I ever got to speak, they gave me the traditions to read, and I couldn't say anonymity, and I wanted to die because, of course, I was this intellectual giant. And she taught me all the things that I value today. She was a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful woman who had one child who walked like she talked, and that child died of our disease, and she never missed a step. She still walked like she talked, and she was a wonderful, wonderful lady who's now gone on to be with God. But the things that I give my babies today, she taught me. And she had told me that I had to stay in L.A. for 5 years. I couldn't go anywhere. So when I had 5 years and a couple months, I said, well, I want to move. I want to go to Alaska because I'd gone to Hawaii on a flip of a coin. And she said, well, that's fine. It's the first day of October. By the time you sell your house and get everything, you'll get there in the spring during breakup. And I put my house on the market the first day of October, and the 12th day of October, I was in Fairbanks, Alaska. First person looked at my house, paid cash to the note, and I was on the road. And the last thing she said to me was, Mona, remember how you are about men? And I said, oh, no, I will never marry again. And I got to Alaska, and I met him. And he had 5 years, and he was a bear of a man, and he thought that I was little and helpless. Now I'm about as helpless as a cobra on a bad day. And after we were married, he told me that he'd been loaded the night before. And of course, I was a director of an inpatient treatment program, so I was going to save him. And for 6 years and a half, I tried to save him. He was a male chauvinist pig. He thought women were second-class citizens. And I adored this man. He thought that without his help I would die. He thought when he was ill that if he held my hand, he possessed the ability to possess my soul. And I did everything that he wanted to do. I stayed home and cleaned house for 2 fucking years. Whew. You know, when you can only clean a house so long, it's real boring. And I haven't got a domestic bone in my body, probably. But my hat's off to women who stay home and clean house and raise kids. It's the toughest job I know. And he was a periodic, and I really had no understanding of periodics. I figured if I only did it once a year, I'd still be shooting dope. You know, and I found out the pain, and I found out the helplessness that can be wreaked by someone who just kind of does it and then quits. You know, we moved all over the state of Alaska. I mean, with him it was chicken or feathers. I was either driving a new Continental or walking. And when there was no in between. I was either wearing so much gold nugget jewelry that I couldn't walk, or man, I didn't even have a clean pair of underwear. And it was one of the probably most astounding men I had ever known in my life. This man could pass paper better than God. He wrote $62,000 worth of bad paper in one weekend on checks that didn't have nobody's name on them. Now, I go to the bank, I want $5 over what I want at the grocery store, and they want 13 pieces of identification and my firstborn. You know? But I knew that I had two choices with him, because you can't watch someone you love die when you know there's a different way. And I either had to leave or I had to join him. And I told him he had the right to die, but I had the right not to watch. And I took him to the airport, and I cried, and I prayed all the way, oh, God, please don't let him change his mind. Please let him go. Please let him go. You know those prayers, if you've ever lived with anybody who's a practicing addict. I used to pray God to kill him, and then if he was 5 minutes late, I'd think, oh, God, no, I didn't really mean it. Please bring him home. And he left, and I got the call 3 months later that he was dead. And I got the call from a lady that had gone with him, who happened to be one of the ladies I sponsored at one time. It's a very close-knit fellowship. And she was real afraid to call me. And I said, you know, I love this man more than any man I've ever known in my life. And I was real glad that he didn't have to die alone, because I don't think anything should have to die alone. And the last words he spoke was to tell me that it would be all right. And I had 14 years clean. And I was one more time at that place that I had been my whole life. It was 65 degrees below zero, and I was in Wasilla, Alaska. And I was outside, and I was cussing God. What is so wrong with me that I can't have what you give everybody else? And within 2 weeks of when he died, I lost everything. I lost the best legitimate job I will ever have in my life. I lost a husband, and I lost my health. And I told God, fuck you. Fuck recovery. I phoned all my babies and said, find somebody else, and I made up my mind that I was going to kill myself. And at that time, I had a regional position. So I wrote letters to my kids, and I cleaned my house so that my mother couldn't come and say, see, she's still a pig. And I got the drugs that I knew would kill me, and I was going to go to a meeting, and we had to go 400 and some miles, and I thought, well, I'll do this, and then they'll be sorry when I'm gone. They'll know what pain I was in when I was there. And we went to the business meeting. They said, well, has everybody read Mona's report? They said, yes. They said, oh, fine, Mona, you don't have to read it. It's fine. I thought, well, fuck, I could have stayed home and killed myself. I know, but since I'd gone so far, I went to the speaker meeting, and he was my Eskimo. And he said what I wanted to hear. And he said, if you're angry at God and you resent this program and you resent everything and everything is going on in your life, you're suffering from untreated addiction. And this is what you do. You work steps 4 through 9 until the pain goes away. And it took 2 years for the pain to go away from me. In that time, I had surgery, and I had to go home to California. And California is not where I'd planned on spending my senior years. You know, and I had to go home and live with my mother for 10 months. And my tongue is 314 feet shorter than the day I walked in. Because I learned the most valuable lesson that I learned about my mother. When I had time I went to make amends to my mother, and she was busy, and then I went back again, and she looked at her watch, and she said, Mona, could we do this again? I got to play bridge, and I did not speak to my mother for 8 years. And then I wrote my mother a 43-page letter because I had this horrible feeling my mother was going to die, and I was never going to get to tell her how very sorry I was for the pain that I had caused her, and she has never acknowledged that letter from that day to this day. But see, what I learned is what my sponsor told me. I have one job with my mother, and that is to love her. I said, but she won't take responsible for my addiction. My sponsor said, it's not her addiction, it's your addiction. She doesn't have to take any responsibility. You do. So I learned about making amends. I do not make amends because I'm a wonderful human being. I make amends because I flat fucking owe them. And if people give me something nice for it, good. And if they don't, I still owe them. But the freedom I have today is I can truly tell you as I stand here, I love my mother, and that was not true my whole life. I don't like her any better. I don't approve of her lifestyle any better, but I truly love her, and I call her on a daily basis to make amends to her because she did not know what to do with me. I was in 27 treatment facilities before I got clean, and my mother spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on trying to help me, and I depended on that emotional blackmail to get money from her. I'd call, and I'd say, send me money. She'd say, no. I'd say, fuck you, and I knew the check was in the mail. I know, and we still play that game. I had to go ask my mother for money a few months ago, and I said, Ma, I really need to borrow this money for that. And she said, no. I said, okay, thank you. And she ran it by me like, did you miss it? Did you forget the game? And I said, no, Mom, I appreciate it. You know, I know if you could, you would. And she just looked at me like she must have forgotten how this game works between the two of us. And when I came home, I had always wanted my own treatment facility. And I tried heaven and hell to have my own treatment facility. And my mother says, why don't you get a real job? Like running a treatment facility is a part-time work. My mother doesn't understand. She says, I don't understand how you can say this is a spiritual program when you say God and fuck in the same breath. And I said, well, Ma, I can't explain it to you. But my mother had said, you know, get a real job, and I had taught, and I had done a lot of other things in my life, a few of them legitimate. And so I said, all right, God, I will surrender, and I will do whatever you want me to do. And that was another lesson that I learned when I came back to California. There have only been 2 things in my recovery that I have given to God that He has chosen to take from me. And when I surrendered was in January, and in February I was in my own treatment facility. When I told God I would do whatever you want, what He wanted for me was to have my own treatment facility, and I had, I tried everything, and I got this place, and the guy wanted $80,000 to get in, and I had $1,100, and he let me in, and we were tearing out walls and redoing it, and he didn't even know my name. And I asked him later, how come you let me in? He said, because I knew you guys were about God's work, and that's what I wanted with my house. And right after I had opened a facility, right before that, my oldest son had gone into treatment. And I had asked someone else to be my partner, and they couldn't be. And so my oldest son became my partner. And I wear this ribbon in memory of my oldest son. Those of you who have children know that if you're very, very fortunate, we all have children of our body. And if you're very, very, very fortunate, you'll have a child of your heart. And this young man was that to me. He was blonde and blue-eyed and kind and soft-spoken and all the things I am not. And clean. And 2 years ago, June the 25th, he died of AIDS, clean. And that's what this ribbon is for. And if you were in this room and you have not been tested, I would strongly suggest that you're arrogant, uncaring, unfeeling people. AIDS is not something you can get from crying holding hands. And I believe that everything that God gives me is a gift. And I believe that AIDS was a gift from a loving God to my son. And I don't understand the gift. And I'm not supposed to understand. But I watched this boy waste away. And I saw a giant. He never once said why. He never once said, oh, I might as well go out and shoot dope. He never once said, poor me. He was a giant among men. And I learned truly that a brave man dies once, a coward 1,000 times. And he taught me what it meant to be brave. Because when he was diagnosed, I knew I would run. And I knew when the going got tough, I'd go away. And I didn't. I told him that I would walk with him to the wall. But he had to carry 50%. And I told him I would never lie to him, which was a lie. If you've ever lived with anybody terminally ill, it's true schizophrenia. Because you tell them one thing and your brain screams the truth. Because you see, in those days, if you were diagnosed, you died. That is not fact today. We know 40% of people who are HIV positive never move on. You know, and in my heart, I just knew that he would survive. And in my head, I knew that he would die. And, you know, I don't know about you guys, but a lot of times I don't know why I'm here. And I don't know what I've learned. And on the day my son died, I knew why I'd been here almost 22 years at that time. Because the doctor told me that he would not survive the day out and that I had to go in and tell him that he could go. And I didn't want him to go. I would have given up my children, my grandchildren, my mother, all you motherfuckers in a heartbeat to save them. You know, and I had to go in and tell him that he was going to be with God and that I was proud of him and that I would be fine. And everything in me said, please don't leave me. Because the root of my problem is I am selfish and I am self-centered. And I did not consider his pain. I just considered my own need. And I performed that one unselfish act that I ever performed in my life. And I let him go. And he turned at me and he looked and he said, you mean I'll see Louis? And Louis was the first dwarf diagnosed that died of AIDS. And I said, yes, you will. And he said, well, we had an old dog that we'd put to sleep. And he said, well, I see the boo dog. And I said, yes, you will. And he weighed less than 100 pounds when he died. And I had him in my arms, and he looked at me, and he said, I'm not afraid anymore. And he told me the room was full of a warm light, and he wasn't cold. And he told me that if the end was there, that there was no one that he would rather have with him than me. It's a long ways from selling your ass for a bag. If you wonder why you're here, I believe that's why I was here. I came into this child's life when I was a fighter and he wasn't. And I don't understand the gift of AIDS. And I don't understand why God took him. But I know why I was here. And I knew why I had made peace with me, because I didn't run. And I didn't leave. And I was a class act. You know, and that's what I wanted to be from the time I was 10 years old, was a class act. And I wanted to know all my life that I had made a difference. And today I know that that's true about me. And I believe that he was in my life for me to learn that about me. And what God does is God took him home to be with him, and he's whole, and he's happy. And he probably looks at me sometimes and says, oh, there she is, throwing a tantrum again. And no, and what I have in my heart, death cannot take from me. The love I felt for this child was the vow I had told you for 40 years that I kept. And what a waste of all the people that I cut out of my life because I was afraid of the pain of losing them if I loved them. And today I can love you and know that you're just on loan from God to me. And you may be in my life forever, and you may be very transient. But I will never again rob myself of the opportunity to know the joy of loving. I will not do that for myself anymore. In closing, I'm asked a lot what recovery means to me, and if you've heard my tape, please don't ask me why I don't change, because this is what I say, and that's as good as it gets. I believe Martin Luther King said it best in Washington, D.C., free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, I'm free at last. Thank you, and God bless you.